Thank you all for joining the Center for Innovative Policies panel. Look to the states, Democratic governors on the climate crisis and how we can meet the moment. My name is David Turner, and it is my honor to welcome Secretary Jennifer Granholm, as well as Governors Lujan Grisham, John Bell Edwards, Steve Sisolak, and Roy Cooper. Secretary Granholm is the 16th Secretary of Energy and only the second woman to lead the department. Maybe just as important, to today's discussion, she served as the 47th governor of Michigan from 2003 to 2011. So she has a unique understanding of how we can make progress on combating climate change at the state level. With that, I would like to turn over the discussion to the Secretary to begin our panel.
Great, thanks so much, David. Great to be here today with fellow govs. And I must say, I really appreciate the state level focus. Laboratories of democracy are always so much more creative and nimble often than what we have seen in the past, at least here in Washington. This is a new trip for me. So I think we all recognize that we're on the cusp of this once in a generation moment in this country. As we speak, literally, Congress is working to send this historic infrastructure package to the president's desk. And I don't say this lightly, but so much is on the line. And the biggest engine for job creation that we've seen in well over a decade is on the line. Our nation's ability to compete and lead in the 21st century economy is on the line. The best opportunity we've ever had to prevent the worst of climate change is on the line. And you know we've got to turn the ship around because you're already experiencing the devastating impacts of climate change in your states. I mean, just this summer, you've seen explosive fires and scorching heat waves in Nevada and in New Mexico. Last month, Hurricane Ida sweeping through Louisiana and North Carolina and several other states, over $1 billion in damage, over 1 million people without power. You know, you've recognized the need to act long before the events of this summer, of course. And in fact, you've been leading the charge for climate action, certainly longer than I've been Secretary of Energy. You're part of the Climate Alliance. You stayed committed to the Paris Agreement throughout the past 4 years when the US had gotten out. And meantime, you've been accelerating climate action in your states, which is very exciting, providing hopefully a blueprint for federal policy. And it's your leadership that's inspired so many of the national infrastructure priorities, starting with the bipartisan infrastructure deal, right, which includes these historic investments to upgrade our infrastructure and to make it more resilient and to build out transmission and EV charging stations and invest in low carbon technologies and so much more. So that bipartisan infrastructure deal, that we can, bless you, really be proud of, but alone, it's not going to get us where we need to go. We have got to have the rest of the president's Build Back Better agenda if we really want to fight and chance to get our emissions under control, if we want to go to Glasgow next month with the credibility necessary to build on the Paris Agreement, if we truly want America to corner the $23 trillion global clean energy market and create millions of jobs in the process. So all of that is possible through that reconciliation bill. And we're looking at policies that would build off your accomplishments and take them to the next level. So you've set these bold clean energy targets. Governor Cooper, like North Carolina's new goal to deploy 2.8 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. Governor Sisolak, your Nevada's standing as one of the top states for solar development. We're working on this clean electricity performance program that would get the rest of the states to follow your lead. We're pushing for tax credits like Governor Lujan Grisham, your New Mexico solar tax credit, to help make all of the states the attractive place to do business that obviously New Mexico is. We're looking at major investments in domestic manufacturing for clean energy, like the floating offshore wind platforms that Louisiana-based company Gulf Island is building for an offshore wind farm on the East Coast. So you know, Governor Bell Edwards, we really just want to make sure that we take that fossil expertise and apply it to a clean energy future. And so anyway, we're looking at block grants, you should know, to state and local governments that would help you further your own goals and get you further down the pike. And the key to remember here is that the window for bold climate action at the federal level anyway is open right now. And it's clear that we need both of these pieces of legislation the infrastructure package, the reconciliation bill to meet the moment, but there's just no guarantee that that window is going to stay open for long. And there's no telling when we're going to get another shot once that shuts. So we just cannot let this moment pass by. As a former governor, I know how crucial your voices are in moments like this. Your perspectives need to be heard right now as our country makes this pivotal decision, because once we get this done, it's your states that are going to see the jobs created and dollars invested in your states. And as a we want to amplify and hire people and create whole industries in your state. So let's work together. I'm excited to hear from all of you. Let's jump into the discussion. For those of you who are just joining, we've got Governor Cooper of North Carolina, Governor Edwards of Louisiana. We've got Governor Lujan Grisham of New Mexico and Governor Sisolak of Nevada. You know them. They are fantastic leaders. And in lieu of me going through your whole bios, let me just start with a question of each of you, and I'll go in alphabetical order. And the question is this. So, we're seeing a race around the world, right, to attract the jobs of the clean energy future. So if you could just briefly touch on, because we'll go into it in a little more depth in a minute, where you are most focused on creating new jobs in this clean energy economy in your state, and how will the historic investments in President Biden's Build Back Better agenda help you to do that? So maybe we'll start with the C, Governor Cooper of North Carolina. Gov, you there?
Hey, yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Secretary Granholm. We appreciate your leadership and the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration with this major infrastructure piece. I'll tell you, we're looking at offshore wind jobs and solar jobs. We're already number 3 in the country in solar install capacity. So thousands of jobs are already there in North Carolina. And I'm excited to tell you about new legislation we have working its way through the General Assembly right now. But we see the potential in offshore wind and supply chain in North Carolina. We're right anchored at the mid-Atlantic. We have a smart power 3-state collaborative right now, a memorandum of understanding with Virginia and Maryland. We already have the Kitty Hawk project that we hope to have online in 2026. So we know, and particularly to some of our skeptics about climate change on the other side, you can argue to them that this is an economic boon, and get on the train, because these are going to be the jobs not only of tomorrow, but today. And so we are excited about solar and offshore wind, and we're going to be focusing in those areas.
Awesome. And of course, the tax credits associated with offshore wind will help to amplify and accelerate your strategy. So super exciting. Okay, Governor Edwards, same question to you. Where are you going to focus on the jobs component of this clean energy economy, and where in the Build Back Better agenda do you think will provide you the greatest help in doing that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Madam Secretary, for convening this panel. I want to thank my other governors as well. And I'm not too proud to copy what they're doing in their states and make sure that we can do it here in Louisiana. We've already proven that investments in climate adaptation, like coastal protection and restoration, do lead to lots of really good jobs. See, we've got a master plan where we invest about $1 billion every year. And we see the jobs that come from that to restore our coast, to add to our protection, which is more and more important given the frequency of hurricanes and other severe weather events and so forth here in Louisiana. Offshore wind is a huge potential driver for job creation in Louisiana. And in fact, we've been in the business of offshore oil and gas fabrication and servicing, and those skills, those same companies can fully participate in offshore wind, and in fact already have. Up off of Rhode Island, the very first offshore wind farm. We had several companies from Louisiana with Louisiana workers that were up there doing that. So that gives us an opportunity. Of course, as you know, Madam Secretary, we want those windmills also to be in the Gulf of Mexico, in close proximity to our oil and gas platforms as well. I'm excited about the opportunity we have in Louisiana because of our heavy concentration manufacturing, particularly chemical manufacturing and refining, that through carbon capture and sequestration, we're going to add lots of jobs, and I mean thousands. And this is not pie in the sky. This is coming to fruition as we speak with record investments. One investment in Baton Rouge alone is $9.2 billion to create a refinery to use biofuels, but with carbon capture and sequestration on the back end. And given our pipeline density to transport the carbon and the geologic formations we have here in Louisiana, I would argue there's not a better state in the country, better situated than Louisiana to take advantage of this. And also because we do so much chemical manufacturing here, hydrogen is a real opportunity for us. Blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, to make sure that we can burn a fuel in the future where the only byproduct is water. I think we can all live with that, although we've got enough water here in Louisiana at the moment. I don't think it'll create so much that it's going to be a real problem. But we're excited. We're actually seeing the results of much of this already, and we're just getting started. And so it fits in very well with the president's plan. And it's more urgent here than elsewhere, not just from the opportunity job creation perspective. There is not a state in the nation and very few places in the world that are suffering the ill effects of climate change like we are here in Louisiana, with coastal land loss, sea level rise, the hurricanes that are just growing more frequent and more severe. And so we're excited about the opportunity, but we're determined to take advantage of it as soon as possible. Which is why, as you know, Madam Secretary, I formed the Climate Initiatives Task Force, and we committed ourselves to the Paris Climate Accord goal several years ago. And we're working in that direction and really excited about the opportunities that's going to afford us.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's so much to love from what you've just said in these, in these bills. I mean, both just on the what you talked about with respect to making a community resilient. There's $33.5 billion in there for resilience. There is a huge amount in there on demonstration projects for both carbon capture as well as for clean hydrogen. It's a lot of exciting initiatives. All right, so let's take advantage. Let's go to New Mexico and see what Governor Lujan Grisham can take advantage of with respect to New Mexico's assets. Where are you focusing your efforts on clean energy?
Well, Secretary, great to see you again. Thank you as well for inviting me. And I take a little exception to Governor Edwards' remarks. He meant to say there's no better state than Louisiana except for New Mexico, who is ready to go on.
You knew that was coming.
From carbon capture, sequestration, and hydrogen. What Build Back Better and the infrastructure pieces of legislation do for tackling climate change and creating innovation is it finally marries real job creation outside of building the infrastructure and being really clear where the innovation and company roles will meet. And as you're talking about resiliency and equity, and I know we're going to talk about that further, look, these are investments where we can couple them with the things that we're already doing. As we're retiring our refineries, we know that we can transform them so that they're ready to do hydrogen. In that transformation, we're training the innovators and jobs for tomorrow. We're going to turn methane into fuel cells on site, where we've invested in centers of excellence so that we've got universities and community colleges clearly and squarely focused on clean energy, climate change, jobs of the future, then that's going to work because we're a free college state. And this is money that makes sure that that's sustainable, not just for 1 year or two or my term or the next term. It's forever. We create that's the priority job creation for the state, both rural and urban. And as you know, the United States' largest wind investment is in New Mexico. We're going to beat the other states in solar. We are launching community solar so that we're moving from a utility platform to an all of the above platform. I know you're aware that we also have incredible assets for geothermal. So these are jobs that really never got the attention, not just in terms of building it, grid modernization, microgrids, transmission, clean fuel standards, but it's making sure that when you decarbonize each sector, and as you know, we're prepared to do that for transportation and hydrogen, we then signal to mid-schoolers, to high schoolers, to current workers, that there's this huge energy future that allows them to tackle and combat climate change, make the state safer, and be in a leading international role. That's what people want for jobs and careers. They want real futures and opportunities, and they want work that they can be squarely proud of. Both these investments do both of those aspects for all of us, but particularly for New Mexico. And I don't want to talk after John Bell Edwards ever again in this panel.
All right. Well, I know you guys have such great opportunities to steal ideas from one another, but also to compete against one another. So
Productively.
I know, right?
The race to the top, Secretary.
Yes, exactly. Governor Sisolak, let's go to Nevada. Tell us what you are focused on from the perspective of a sector within the clean energy economy that you can compete in. I can guess a little bit. And then what aspect of the Build Back Better agenda you think will be most helpful in trying to achieve that?
Well, thank you, Secretary. And we're racing Governor Grisham to the top. I mean, we're in Nevada. We're convinced that we've got an awful lot to offer on the environmental front, both for our environment and the jobs that it's going to create. Certainly solar, Nevada leads the nation in terms of solar production. We've got a lot of sunshine out here. We've got a lot of land to provide more solar. And we invested in a solar transmission lines to make us part of the grid where we can export a lot of the solar that is being created and being captured. And we're proud to be able to do that. In addition to the solar and the transmission, mining has become extremely important. We have some of the largest lithium deposits in the state of Nevada that are necessary for batteries, whether it's for vehicles, for batteries, for storage, whatnot. And we're trying to advance the mining of lithium so that the entire country can benefit from the production of batteries and moving forward. And as Governor Grisham said, we're also very into geothermal. Northern Nevada has some big geothermal situations that we have managed to capture. It's clean, it's effective. It's been kind of taking a second stance for a while to the other ones, you know, to wind or solar and whatnot. But geothermal is something that's expanding when it's available. We invested $100 million in our EV charging stations in the state of Nevada, which is going to be extremely important. If you want people to buy electric vehicles, you've got to have a charging station for them to go so that they can travel some type of a distance. And we've set those up across the state so that whatever road you're on, you're going to be able to find access to those charging stations. But we're committed to expanding all of our renewables, particularly, as I say, in the area of solar. We've got a lot more under development and plan to continue to pursue that as best we possibly can.
Well, certainly the Southwest has got the ability to power the country a couple of times over, probably, if we were able to take advantage both of public lands as well as those landowners who would be willing to help us to be able to harvest solar and wind, for that matter. So very exciting profile, and exciting to be able to think that you'll have resources to be able to build these out. Let me jump into sort of specific questions for you, building off of what you have said. Thank you so much for giving me and people who are watching an idea about what you want to focus on. Lots of diversity in terms of the types of energy. Governor Cooper, let me go back to you for a moment. You know, offshore wind is so fantastic, and you talked about that. I'm wondering what you have been thinking about with respect to environmental justice. I mean, a lot of communities in North Carolina have disproportionately shouldered the pollution burden for decades. And I'm wondering what you're already doing to help communities of color with pollution reduction, job training, decreasing energy burden, and how will additional federal investment help?
This is a significant issue. As we know, often people in marginalized, vulnerable communities get hit the hardest by climate change, whether it's through flooding, extreme temperatures without air conditioning, whether it is being beside fossil fuel being generated and dealing with the effects of that. Here in North Carolina, we have created an environmental justice and equity board that is part of our Department of Environmental Quality, where we get input from people who are concerned about environmental justice issues. We are really excited about a new program that we have in place in our solar area. I mentioned how well we are doing in solar install capacity, and we're working with our community colleges to establish paid internships in minority communities to work in the renewable energy field. And the Biden-Harris administration, through the Department of Commerce, has established the Good Jobs Challenge and the Build Back Better Challenge. And we're going to be making applications for that kind of paid internship to get jobs in our minority communities in the renewable area. I think long-term, however, fighting climate change and making sure that North Carolina does its part on reduction of carbon emissions is critical. I'm very excited. We have a vote this afternoon in the North Carolina Senate on a piece of legislation in our state that's going to be transformative. We have a vertical integration system in North Carolina where we have major utilities, Duke Energy being the major one, regulated by the Utilities Commission. This legislation will require our Utilities Commission to take the steps needed to get to a 70% carbon reduction by 2030. Wow. And to get to carbon neutral by 2050 here in North Carolina. And it will also change our regulatory system to provide for incentive performance rates. There's been a disconnect in things like energy efficiency and affordability for low to moderate income people and how utilities are reimbursed for their costs. This will allow our Utilities Commission to use performance-based rates in order to be able to encourage the positive things that we want, like moving to renewable energy, like more energy efficiency. My executive order 2 years ago has set us on this path. We had a stakeholder process for over 2 years. We're also going to work very hard to get more electric vehicles on the road, and we're encouraging our state government to purchase more electric vehicles. We're going to try to get 80,000 more of them on our roads for the next few years. So we know that our vulnerable communities and people who are living on the edge often suffer the most effects from climate change. I think we have to work hard on this issue of environmental justice and to listen to these concerns, react to them, and then step back and make sure that we are laser focused on reducing our carbon emissions, both from the national level, the state level, and a global level. And look forward to working with your administration to get this done. And I'm hoping that we can get this legislation enacted in the next week or so.
Yes, it sounds great, both on the state and federal level, big pieces moving on the environmental justice side of things, just so that everybody's aware. You know, the president, of course, has said that he has created an Justice 40, Environmental Justice 40 initiative, so that 40% of the benefits of these investments will go to communities that are frontline communities, communities that have either disproportionately been negatively affected, as you say, from climate pollution, or communities that might be transitioning from fossil fuels and finding themselves without economic opportunity. So place-based strategies on the federal level, where we can do sort of a screen to determine which counties, which census tracts are the most in pain in your communities. We want to work on how we can double up and really synergize the federal investment with state efforts to ensure that these communities are not left behind and are seen and not unseen. So thanks for that. Governor Edwards, you know, you've got a lot going on, obviously. You mentioned resilience, but I actually want to start by asking you about I know Louisiana has a climate task force, a Louisiana Climate Initiative Task Force, working to put your state on a path to net zero by 2050 also. And I'm wondering what opportunities and industries. You've mentioned a few of them, but which ones do you pin your greatest hopes on in being able to achieve those carbon reductions that are set forth by your task force?
Well, thank you very much for the question. We're the only state in the nation where most of the greenhouse gas emissions don't come from power generation. It comes from chemical manufacturing and refining and so forth. And so we have a little different mix here than the rest of the country, but it gives us tremendous opportunities to really make an immediate impact in two ways. The processes that are used in chemical manufacturing aren't going to change much, at least not in the foreseeable future. But you can make a conscious decision to power that process in a way that's better for the environment and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And then on the back end, you can capture carbon, transport it to where you can sequester it. And so we are really looking at those things, and that's why the wind and the solar are so important on the front end with respect to how we're going to power the chemical manufacturing and so forth. And then the investments in carbon capture and sequestration on the back end. And where we can, we're taking refineries now, and rather than using fossil fuels, we've got a refinery that's going to open in North Louisiana where they're going to use the portions of pine trees that would typically be left on the forest floor when the tree is harvested, and they're going to refine diesel out of that. It'll actually be carbon negative when it's concluded. In Baton Rouge, the investment I spoke of earlier at the Port of Baton Rouge, $9.2 billion. They will use corn and soybean in order to refine diesel and do carbon capture and sequestration there. So those are the immediate opportunities that are going to help us to get to that goal. But that Climate Initiatives Task Force that you mentioned is incredibly important because it has environmentalists in it. It's got industry partners. We have academicians, and of course we have state and local government. We have a very robust participation by the minority communities. And I will tell you, it was a moving moment just last week when there was a meeting and Cheryl Gardner, who is the chief of Indian tribe down in Terrebonne Parish, right where Ida came in, and she had been working all day, and as she has for weeks on end now, recovering from the hurricane. And she was stressing the importance that we take action to reduce the negative impacts to the environment and that drive this climate change, because we're actually having, I think it's the first one in the country, we're reselling an entire Native American settlement that has been down at the southern end of Terrebonne Parish on the coast for many generations, and it's just too precarious now. And we're having resettled that entire settlement up into a northern portion of the parish. And obviously we will do that as we need to, but we should reduce the need if we are able as well. So it all sort of fits together. But that task force that you mentioned has been incredibly important. And by February, they will produce a detailed plan. So we won't just have the aspirational goal to be net zero by 2050. We will have a plan to follow in order to make sure that we get there.
So obviously super important to have a plan because you need to know where you're going, right? But sometimes stuff hits you, although frankly, it's probably in your plan too, given how often you've been hit by hurricanes, et cetera. The movement of a community is just so traumatic. And obviously we don't want to see a lot of movement of communities, which we'd much rather address the problem and have resilience just very quickly, because I do want to get to if the federal government could help you on your resilience side, like what one thing would be the most important, in addition to money, like what would be the most important thing that you would want to address from a resilience point of view?
Well, look, it really is money, but the money would be invested into more coastal protection and restoration because we have rising sea levels, we have coastal erosion and subsidence all happening at one time. It's a perfect trifecta. And we need storm surge barriers. We need that marsh between our populated areas and the Gulf of Mexico. And without it, those hurricanes they approach our population centers with a lot more strength, and the storm surge is much higher. And so rebuilding our barrier islands and restoring our marsh, incredibly important. And where we have a precariously situated settlement, improving the levee and the protection systems that they have would prove very important as well. And by the way, these are real opportunities that we have with the infrastructure bill that's pending in the House of Representatives right now.
Yep, very, very, very hopeful. All right, let me ask Governor Lujan Grisham. I'm going to switch gears here and ask you about transmission. I know I was super grateful to be able to travel to New Mexico in August and meet with you and Senator Heinrich, and really interested to know how New Mexico, and I'll ask the same question of Governor Sisolak, because I know in Nevada we're doing the same thing, how you're working to expand transmission and how it can become maybe a clean energy exporter, and how federal investments can help achieve that, and what it would mean for New Mexico's economy.
Again, thank you. And thank you for being here. So I inherited a situation where for 8 years, we were not interested in doing transmission work or transmission lines. And again, that's the power of good federal policy and good state policy. Where they marry, you frankly create your own roadmap and a set of incentives. So we joined the Regional Transmission Authority. We are now, as you know, accelerating where we are in our transmission upgrades and finishing so that we can move power and clean energy in a variety of ways. And something I like to remind the Mexicans about, and sometime the rest of the country, all the major power grids come together in New Mexico. And so in a tiny rural community, Clovis, Curry County, we know that we can be the center of all of these spokes to move now clean energy. But it means having a regional and national upgraded, reliable transmission lines, and they have to be finished. And I think the big problem in the West is, particularly in New Mexico, if we're that center, we have to be faster and more effective. And that means we finally have a federal policy that allows us to use federal initiatives, federal dollars, federal programs, and federal grants. That allows us to accelerate where we are. No easy effort when the messaging for a decade was to private landowners. You don't want that. And that has really been fixed. And frankly, I agree with Governor Edwards. Having a climate task force, it was one of the first executive orders I signed after being elected in 2019. And that really does make a difference because it allows stakeholders to talk about what it means and to take out some of that unknown or lack of predictability or tension between what you're really doing and why. And it also engages these rural and often communities of color in that design. So we're feeling a bit bullish about where we finally are, and excited to get that finished up in the next several months, and doing our share to make sure that we're moving the incredible production of renewable energy, not just so that we're using it in our own state, but moving it so that it's reliable and available across the country. That's the only way that we move from fossil fuels. So count New Mexico in.
The rest of the nation thanks you for that. We just did our solar futures study. We released it through the National Renewable Energy Lab. And they were saying that last year, both on wind and solar, it was the most installation of wind and solar that we have ever had. And it's so 17 gigawatts, huge number. However, we have to double and triple that if we are going to get to this goal of 100% clean electricity by 2035. So we're counting on you, all of y'all who have said that you're focused on solar, which leads me to Governor Sisolak. I know that he too is focused on solar and has tremendous resources as well. I visited the town site solar wind farm when I was there, which is near Lake Mead. And boy, it is an amazing thing to behold because it's all American-made solar panels on American-made racks. It's just using union labor, which is fantastic. So, Gov, Nevada has shown so much leadership in clean energy. And I know you've got this legislation that you just signed that's going to help also build out transmission. and storage, energy storage. And I'm wondering how you see that as propelling Nevada's economy and whether you'll be exporting some clean energy to the rest of the country too.
Well, thank you, Secretary. And I think what Governor Lujan Grisham said is absolutely correct. And we're trying to follow some of those same lines. We have accelerated our transmission development in the state of Nevada. Last legislative session, we passed a bill creating a new line that's going to be able to move some of this energy. We hope to become a regional transmission joint by 2030. We've invested $2 billion in transmission updates for the state of Nevada. And I know under Governor Lujan Grisham, they've done the same thing in New Mexico to try to get this energy. We can produce a lot more than we can use in the state of Nevada, and we need to be able to export that. Now, I was at one of our universities the other day, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. They're working on a program so that we can transmit the energy from point A to point B without losing any of the energy, which currently you lose a lot of the energy when it's transmitted. But they are doing research where they come up with a program that we will be able to save that energy that otherwise would have been lost, which is huge for us. And as you said earlier, we have an awful lot of land available. If you drive from Las Vegas to Carson City or Reno, there's a lot of wide open land, federal land that is ideal for solar. It's got a lot of sun, probably 300 plus days per year, which make it ideal for producing solar energy and getting it on the grid so that we can use it in other places, not lose it along the way when we're transmitting it. So we're doing everything we can. We're committed to getting to 100% by 2050. And I think that we're going to be able to do that.
Well, we are excited to hear that. You know, the Department of Energy, if these bills go through, there will be a grid deployment authority that attaches itself to the Department of Energy. And working with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, we want to plow through some of the delays that have existed and working with states, obviously, because some of that might be across some state lands, but we want to prioritize the federal lands to make it easier and to streamline it, whether it is lands that are in the Bureau of Land Management or lands that are easements along the federal highway system through the Department of Transportation. We know we have to connect where this power is produced to where it needs to go. And you guys are you're right in the thick of it. So super excited to work with you going forward on that. So David, I'm going to end up turning this back to you. I know you have some other potential questions for the Govs. I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and interact with my former fellow Govs. Anyway, I feel very connected to what's happening in the states because that's where the rubber meets the road, and know that this administration is going to be supportive of the laboratories of democracy. We believe you do have the best solutions. We believe the place-based strategies that the administration wants to embark upon must be hand in glove with you and communities across the country, particularly those communities that that have been left behind. So you have a partner in us. Thank you so much for allowing me to have this conversation with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and thank you, governors. And with that, that will conclude the panel. Thank you very much for watching. Maddie, go ahead. Hi, everyone. As you join, if you could please be muted. So I will call on folks for questions, but that would be helpful. Just making sure we don't have complete chaos in the Zoom.
Yep.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining the panel. I wanted to kick it off with Jeremy Dillon of E&E News for the first question. Jeremy, you there?
Hey, sorry. With the clean energy payment program being pitched as part of the reconciliation package, I'm just curious what you all make of that and whether it would help your states kind of make that transition and kind of how you're taking that specific policy proposal.
Jeremy, anybody you want to go first, or is that open-ended?
Open-ended, whoever has thoughts would be great.
Jeremy, I have to confess that I am not familiar enough with what's in the reconciliation package to be able to offer an answer to your question. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, and I do as well, Jeremy. I'm familiar with the package, but I'm not familiar with that specific as it relates to that. But we in Nevada are certainly open to any help we can get from the federal government as it relates to this entire issue.
All right. We will kick it over to Ben Gurman. Ben with Axios.
Oh, yes, hi. Oh, I don't immediately have a question, but thank you for having me on the call.
Of course. Melinda with the AP. Melinda, do you have a question? Melinda, you're still on mute. Okay. Kelsey Tamburino with Politico.
Yeah, I have a similar question about reconciliation. Could you talk a little bit about what you'd like to see in the clean energy tax package that's being debated and whether or not you'd like to tie some of those requirements to domestic content requirements as well as prevailing wage requirements?
Kelsey, this is Governor Lujan Grisham. What's hard about a lot of those, both initiatives, incentives, and restructuring, including the taxes, is we don't know what the guidelines or the rules are going to be. I'm interested in the climate change initiatives and reconciliation from a more global standpoint as we deal with the guidance, depending upon what gets out of there and what doesn't. If we don't create, New Mexico already has tax incentives for the development of solar. We've initiated community solar. If you don't move it beyond your utility sector, if you're not clear about what happens with your rural electric cooperatives, that creates disincentives for the states to actually engage and take advantage of both the federal investments and those strategies. But until I really know how it's all going to work together, I have to agree with the other govs. We want the debate. We know Building Back Better in terms of creating a set of policies that allow you to have sustainability more than, in addition, I shouldn't have said more than, in addition to key, clear infrastructure investments. I think this is one of the smartest aspects in terms of a federal administration proposing to Congress. You can't build it and not understand how you sustain it. You have to do both of those, and you have to be really clear that you're leaning in on what your priorities are. Addressing climate change from a national perspective and putting states in the mix in terms of how they finance it early and later is critical. But it is hard to kind of understand exactly what it is that they will give us opportunities to redevelop in our own states or to enhance better. And I am interested in those tax initiatives, tax incentives, and particularly when we get to some of the innovations for carbon capture and sequestration.
Tim Gardner with Reuters, you have a question?
Cool. Hi.
Tim, it's a little hard to hear you.
Sorry, thank you. Just any thoughts any of the governors have on carbon capture and how the the lawmakers can advance that? The current 45Q price being $50 a ton. Is there ways to expand that and make it work better for both power companies and industry?
Yeah, I can try to answer that, Tim. I engage quite often with CEOs of companies who are really involved in carbon capture and sequestration, and the 45Q tax credit is incredibly important in order to make this happen. And the $50 a ton is obviously helpful. There is a prevailing sentiment that it needs to be closer to $85 per ton in order for it to be meaningful and generous enough to really make a difference. I know there have been some efforts in Congress to increase it to around the $85 mark. I hope that they will be successful so that the amount of that tax credit won't be an impediment. Whether that happens or not, I'm not certain. Obviously, I don't think anybody can predict anymore what Congress is going to be able to agree upon. But I know it would be very helpful for us here in Louisiana.